A manager needs to realize that time with their team is not their time.
How should leaders actually practice?
I'll give you three things. I want to see everyone on my team live to their full potential, and coaching is the way to do that.
Things that we shouldn't do during coaching.
I would say there's two.
There you have it. What's your excuse not doing it from tomorrow?
I guarantee you that if people stopped and asked themselves that question, coaching would come into play.
Nikki, can you please stop making the rest of us look so bad? Hello. This is Michael Ocean. See you at SellMeThisPen. Guys, today I'm not only excited, I'm grateful. And I'm not kidding. Because I have my great friend, Nikki Schanzer, on the call. And me and Nikki actually work at Hopin at some point, and I just have amazing memories. And the main reason why I'm grateful, because when we started this project, she was one of the very first leaders who was kind enough to spend sometimes, although she was extremely busy, helping us understand the problem we want to solve, for our target audience. And today, before we start, I want to do a quick introduction because I think it's important to get to know her a little bit. So Nikki started in marketing, then she spent 10 years in sales, actually selling. And then she moved to post-sales side of things with, helping with renewals and upsells. Then started leading enablement for both the sales reps and now for leaders with some of the best-in-class sales organizations like Groupon, Top Hat, Dropbox, Hopin, LinkedIn. Nikki, can you please stop making the rest of us look so bad? All right. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here, and it's always a pleasure to hang out with you, Mo.
Thank you. So naturally today we want to talk about coaching, and we want to get, some ideas from Nikki, who's been there and done that, how to actually run a one-on-one coaching session in particular more effectively. And I wanted to start by reading a post that you recently shared on LinkedIn. Hey, managers, next time someone on your team asks you for guidance, ask this question. Do you want me to tell you the answer, or would you like to be coached? So for those who actually didn't see this post, can you in a few words just explain again why it's a great question?
Yeah. I know I've used it a lot when leading teams. But I think that questions equally important for the manager as it is for their team member. And I say that because for a manager, it's this question that you have to get into a rhythm of asking, because our inherent action is to tell, is to give answers. Many times, especially like in sales, in any role, typically you've done the role before you become a manager of that role. And so your natural instinct is to just spew out what you did. And that actually doesn't allow somebody to grow on their own. And a lot of times people don't listen to that, even though we would love to think that they all think that our ideas are great. So I think for the manager, it's a great moment to stop yourself from telling and teaching and give themselves a chance to lean into what their team members need at that moment. And for the person on the other end, for the team members, it can give them the opportunity to decide if they want to surface the answer themselves or be given the answer, but this time with their ears open and an open mind. I really just want to point out that coaching is a long-term strategy with super impactful benefits. Takes time for people to change. And as a leader, you have to decide if you're willing to change up your current approach. When do you direct and inspect? When do you teach? When do you coach? And so the best strategy is one that combines them all.
That's amazing. Look, I've never experienced this in my life, being on the front line for many years. I never had a single, manager or leader get on a call with me and say, like, how do you feel about it? Do you want me just to, or you want to explore and just let your brain actually, analyze things and then share your thoughts on it? Like, it's typically just a one way directional, feedback. This is what went wrong. This is based on our experience or other team members that worked. How do you feel? Well, I feel great. Do I even get to oppose to that?
Yeah. I mean, that says something, doesn't it? If you're going, wow, what would my job look like if I got to come to my own conclusions or got to brainstorm in a safe space? It absolutely changes the dynamic and empowers people, makes them realize you have a lot of these answers on your own. Or it surfaces areas where they go, ooh, I'm actually not comfortable with this. Like, can you just tell me? And it's a
Hmm.
starting point because the next time they might go, actually, coach me on this.
Interesting. So let me ask you something, Nikki, because conceptually it seems like an easy adjustment. Okay, next time I'm on a call, I'm gonna ask this question. But to your point, we are naturally ready to give the answer or start talking because of our past experiences and with good intention. Like nobody has bad intention, right? We want to help the person in front of us by giving all the answers we think is helping them. But how should leaders actually practice
Mm.
so it becomes second nature? It becomes part of their coaching naturally?
Yeah, I love that you asked this because it takes a lot of practice. But I'll give you three things. The first is always showing up with what I'm going to call coaching mindset. And what I mean by that is before you jump on a one-on-one or have a conversation with someone on your team, can you take a deep breath and tell yourself that it's time to get curious? And if you, many times I do this before I coach my clients. Um,
Hmm.
I I'm a life coach and I have to sometimes context shift and I've had a long day or something and I have to go, you know what? This meeting's not about me. This is not about me. I need to be curious about the person on the other end. And sometimes it's a deep breath and asking myself, can you get curious? And it's a really small step that can allow for a better conversation and one where a manager doesn't feel like they have to have all the answers. And like I said earlier, it really makes your team member feel more empowered. So um, I think off of that, it's like, how do you understand where your triggers are to want to answer and replace it? And that leads me to the second thing, which is I think, yes, it's asking powerful questions always. And yes, it's about getting curious, but how can you make your questions better? And I love this concept of making your questions plural. And so instead of what's one idea you have, it would be what are some ideas you have?
Hmm.
And have you like Mo, have you ever been on a call and someone's like, okay, if you could do one thing, what's that one thing you're going to do? And so you answer with one thing.
Hmm.
Imagine if somebody said to you, what are all the possibilities?
Hmm.
That's a different conversation. And you can see like your mind is going to either go to one thing or multiple, and you want to keep people in the multiple. Um,
Hmm.
so making your questions plural. And then the third is how you start and end a one on one. And at the start, it's a question like, what do you want to accomplish in our time together today? Or what are you hoping to focus on? And many times people will be like, I don't know, like they'll ramble. This happens every time. Well, I have this deal, or I have, I'm really stressed about this. I need to multi thread in this deal, and customer ghosted me. Like it'll be a lot of things. And so I will asterisk this with you actually as a manager go, okay, so walking out of this, what are you hoping to accomplish? And like getting them to start to whittle it down, but you might have to ask a few times. So that's starting the meeting. And then the second is how you end. It's getting people to share back their aha moments or their takeaways. So, okay, what are you taking away from today's conversation? And what are the action items you'll be working on?
Hmm.
And if you can get that from somebody as a leader, you can start to see pattern recognition over time. And it's a rep or an individual contributor on any team committing to their own ideas, which is the most important thing. Because as a leader, it doesn't matter what your ideas are. Your job isn't to fill up someone's to-do list. It's for somebody to take ownership of what they are going to do.
I
So
love
those are
this.
the three I would say.
It sounds like a great discovery call. It's
Yes,
just like you're
that's
going on a
exactly
good
what it is.
discovery call, and it's all about you, not about them.
Yes, exactly.
Can I ask a follow-up question about what you just
Hmm.
said, especially about point number one?
Hmm.
So first and foremost, I love this framework. To your point, I think after practicing it for sometimes you find a pattern that it becomes your best practice, hopefully.
Yeah.
But the first part, being curious as a leader, and some people are naturally curious. They're curious about everything in life, but some people maybe they want to build that habit of being curious. Do you have
Yeah.
any tips for leaders out there who want to improve that specific curiosity skill, if you will?
Yeah, I would say in its simplest form is if you're going to ask questions and you're unsure of what to ask, say things like, tell me more about that,
Hmm.
or walk me through that, walk me through your thinking. And then when you're asking questions, make them what and how questions versus why. The more you can stay away from why is a great thing. I listen to a lot of coaching calls, and how many people are saying things like, so why would you approach it that way, which
Hmm.
can feel awful. You're like, I don't know why I did. I thought it was a good idea. Like people start to feel like a little bit of shame, and so it's like, walk me through your thinking. So just tactfully, I would say get exploratory, but it's through the questions.
It's really interesting what you said. Reminded me of Chris Voss. I don't know. I'm sure you know him.
I love Chris
Eh,
Voss. Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. I did a training where we talked about some of those topics of like
Hmm.
a concept I'm thinking about a lot is like the counterfeit yes. Like,
Mm.
how do you get people to tell you no when they mean it and yes when they mean it? So yeah, I love Chris Voss. Yes.
You just open it up. So let's just roll with that. Just tell us a little bit more about that because I want to know. I want to know. I'm curious.
Yes. Um, okay, I'm gonna ask you, Mo. Like, have you ever been in a room and somebody says, "Any questions?"
Of course, the answer is no. Sure, I'm not gonna
And
ask.
you're like, "Are you kidding me? Like, I am not going to like." Nope. I would say that's a counterfeit no. Um, or have you ever been in a meeting and everyone says, "Does everything look good?" Like you're showing something. Does this look good?
Hmm.
You're like leading somebody there.
Of
And
course.
so what you want to do is like flip the questions and say things like, what are some things? And I'm going to make it plural. So I'm kind of making this my own. Before like Chris Voss reaches out to me and like sues me. Um, Essentially, you would say something like, what are some ways we can make this better? It's getting people to call out the thing that they usually aren't going to say. So I think counterfeit yeses are really dangerous because we're setting people up to be forced to say yes to things when they might not feel comfortable opening up about the truth. Um,
Hmm.
and it's all because of how we position it in the first place. Like, point to the thing that you actually like. How can we fix this? You tell me.
Hmm.
So yeah, I probably didn't explain it perfectly, but
No, I think you did.
I
It,
think a
it
lot about
sounds like it's more of a collaboration rather than I'm asking you a question to basically, get the answer I want, which is either a yes or a no, and I
yeah,
don't even know why.
yeah, false yes. Are you like, can I call you next week? Sure. But doesn't mean the person's going to pick up.
Yeah.
Like, is next week a bad time for me to
Hmm.
call you? That's a version of it too.
Hmm.
Is if somebody says yes to something, make sure it's real.
This is so interesting. We're talking about like coaching the reps, coaching the coach, but it's really like to me it's like a great sales lesson too because many
Hmm.
of us we run our own sort of discovery calls, whether you do it externally or internally. I think this could apply to any conversation, even in life. It's not necessarily about business only.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't tell you how, as I was going through my coach training, how many times in my head I went, oh, this would have been awesome to learn when I was selling.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
Just because it's all about the way you communicate, and it's the most interesting person is the one who's the most curious
Hmm.
and shows genuine interest. It's not the person who's talking the most in the room. And so I think that uh, that's where I think there's this like unlock for people is curiosity. And when you do that for somebody on your team through coaching, that's where like growth happens. And like I said earlier, it's a long term game. And so you might see incremental growth in a variety of different ways. Sometimes that's a little faster, but like to really watch somebody progress takes time. But you as a leader have to be invested in always showing up that coaching mindset. I think the risk if you don't is that you're going to have a team or performers on your team who don't see their full potential. And if I'm leading a team, I know personally I want to see everyone on my team live to their full potential. And
Hmm.
coaching is the way to do that.
I love this. And you know what it does to me? Yeah, some people accept different sort of like feedback loop, right? Or
Hmm.
the way we receive the feedback might work differently for people. Someone wants
Hmm.
it straight to the point. Can you please tell me what to fix? I gotta go, about my day.
Right.
Or some people need more discovery. But I think this will build a coaching culture and can lead to a mindset shift
Hmm.
for that person in front of you. And this is something they can carry for life, because it's not just about fixing a problem in a sales process or the way it helps them in life, because it makes you realize that what you're learning right now could be applied to anything. You have a disagreement with your neighbor,
Hmm.
apply it. You have a challenge with your child, you can apply it. So this is
Totally.
to me is very powerful. Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails. These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With SellMeThisPen AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only: revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at SellMeThisPen.ai. Can you tell me, now we are talking about like things that we should do or shouldn't do during coaching. I wanted to understand, like, if there are certain things that you see as a typical patterns that managers actually do that do a lot of damage and they should stop
Mhm.
doing them from tomorrow.
Yeah. I would say there's two. The first one I'll call ROE. It's like I'm using sales terminology here. Rules of engagement. I think that a pitfall for managers is sabotaging the time they have with someone on their team by making the agenda their own, taking the conversation where they want it to go, spending the time talking the most. And I think the fix here is that a manager needs to realize that time with their team is not their time. And there are so many ways to update your team that are better opportunities to say what you have to say. That's what team meetings are for. It could be separate, specific one on one time if it's for that person. Um, Email, Slack, quick video. Like there's so many ways to get across what you need to say to update people, but to take their time that is for them and sabotage it is something that I think happens pretty frequently. Um, and the second is what I'll refer to as loose action items. So I think many times people go into one-on-ones and they talk about a lot of things and they're like, cool, talk to you tomorrow or next week. And there's so much that happens that if your person on your team is unclear about what they do next, it's easy to lose momentum. And for a manager, they have nothing to hold them accountable to. And so if you're the manager that has one on ones with loose action items, you can feel really sporadic in I think someone said they were going to do this. Should I follow up with them? Did we agree to that? Like it starts to create this loose path. And I think that the best thing that a manager can do is get really clear. Spend the last 2 to 5 minutes at the end of a one-on-one and go, okay, what are your takeaways? And what are your action items? And I want to call out that here, I'm going to give you an example of a good action item and a bad one. I'll give you the bad one first. A bad action or next step would be I'm going to call my accounts next week. Many times, this is something that someone would say, and the
Mm-hmm.
manager will go, okay.
Mm-hmm.
A great action item would be I'm going to pick my top 3 accounts. I'm going to make sure there are 3 contacts on each. I'm going to reach out to every single one of them by Friday next week.
Mm-hmm.
You see the difference?
Yep.
And I think that we get caught in the loose next step, which is like, yeah, I'm going to do this loose thing. And it doesn't result in anything. And as a
That
manager,
is
I
true.
want to follow up on the second one, on the good one. Like, okay, were you able to reach all 3 contacts at your top 3 accounts by Friday?
Mm-hmm.
That's easier for
I
me to follow up on.
I love it. I'm trying to understand like why people don't do this. Why managers don't actually like do the right thing, whether it be like asking the right questions or setting up the next steps for their reps. Is it the skill gap problem, or is it will
Mhm.
problem, or maybe they're disinterested in coaching? Like, what's the main issue based on your experience coaching, many leaders out there?
Hmm. This is a great question. I think that there isn't like one, here's how to be a manager thing that we all go through.
Hmm.
And I think there's a misconception that a manager equates to being a super individual contributor of what you just did in your job. And they're fundamentally different jobs. And so unless you're going out and seeking some skills around it, it's not inherent to everyone, which is okay. Like they're different skills. They're new skills for a lot of people. People don't wake up and go, "I'm a leader." Like
Hmm.
that's not how it works. And so there's that. And I also think that we tend to go with what we've been modeled. And so I kind of view this as like a vicious cycle of, well, this is how my manager ran one on one, so I'm going to run them that way. And I might tweak a thing or two, but it's like, unless you're stopping and going, what kind of leader do I want to be? I guarantee you that if people stopped and asked themselves that question, coaching would come into play. Coaching is a skill, and we view it as an action, a thing to do. It's like, no, this is like a mindset and how you show up. And there's skills involved, but I feel like a lot of times we're just like looking at it the wrong way.
It's very interesting. You said it's not an action. It's
Mm-mm.
not an action, and we're looking at this as just a yes, checkbox. We
Mhm.
should do it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question:
Hmm.
how do managers can actually measure the efficacy of their one-on-one sessions? So that might be a motivator for them, just to see like even in the tactical aspects of things.
Hmm.
It's not all about like how to be a leader, how to be great. Hopefully people are inspired, by this just to be a great leader for their team. But
Yeah.
what are the, ways that they can actually measure their efficacy of practice?
Yeah. So I'm going to share uh, a story actually about a sales manager that I know who put a pretty incredible process in place and had results to show for it. So I'll share that. And then I promise to give some like few tactical bits. But so he has a team of 7 sales reps. And what he did for a year was he did 30-minute one-on-ones with each rep each week. And that was to talk about, forecast, pipeline, deals, the essentially running of the business conversations.
Hmm.
And he actually had separate 30-minute coaching sessions each week. So he intentionally separated them. And keep in mind, this is somebody who was new to leadership, who also got a team that was all underperforming. So I want to call that out. And he was like, okay, what do I do with this? um, and his approach was leveraging a few, like a mix of coaching tools. So he did a skill gap assessment that was available internally, but there's, I mean, people can Google these. You can also have a conversation with someone on your team and go, what skills do you want to work on? So that can be pretty lightweight or really extensive, depending on what you want to do. He used Gong to identify live moments, so customer interactions that he could gauge what was happening in real life, and then role plays to work on skills in a safe space. So um, he essentially did an average of 6.5 coaching hours. I would say an average of 6.5 coaching hours were spent per rep per quarter, 30 minutes
Hmm.
each. And he reviewed 16 Gong calls per quarter. So about 3 to 4 per rep per quarter. And if you're hearing those numbers, you're going, yeah, that seems like attainable.
Hmm.
Um, I would say for the most part, everyone's busy, but he got really, really specific. And the results were amazing. Um, the attainment performance over time was an average of 57% growth in performance across all
Wow.
4 quarters. Out of 7 reps, only one was managed out. But this process helped with that too, because the manager got super clear on what wasn't working and then had the follow up because he documented all his notes. So he essentially was able to easily manage this person out. Employee engagement scores went up and rep confidence increased. And so, to the tactical, if I had to pick 3 things that people should measure, that leaders should measure, it's if it's sales, I would say attainment over time. Doing at least 2 quarters because change takes a minute. But 4, I think, are better. And yes, a year feels like a long time, but coaching's a long game. Um, and I think this can only be tracked if you do have those separate coaching conversations. If you are not in sales and you have a team and you're doing one-on-ones, it's tracking what people want to focus on. Like, what are their goals and are they achieving them over time? The second is, if you're in sales, gong call performance. If you're not in sales, a lot of times you can use conversation intelligence for a variety of ways, and I would say even for internal meetings. Um, like, what are the moments where somebody can like practice or rehearse? But if you're able to listen to calls, you can create a lightweight scorecard to base your team equally and see those results over time. And then the third I mentioned before, which is just documentation of one on ones and action items. And the ownership of that can be manager or rep led or a mix of both. Like, that's dependent on how people want to do that. But what you'll see is, as a leader, you'll go from feeling like there's loose agenda, loose action items. You're feeling like, I don't know what everybody promised they would do, to pattern recognition, seeing what people really are focused on and what they want to work through. And then I think that while it's harder to measure, this it will absolutely be felt, is that things are on track and a manager can easily go, this is where my team is. Like, you start to understand things more prescriptively. So attainment over time, gone co-performance, and documentation.
There you have it. So what's the what's your excuse not doing it from tomorrow? Because honestly, at least in my space, everybody has the tools, and this is
Mhm.
really easy, actionable, framework that you can apply literally from tomorrow.
Yeah.
Nikki, for the last question,
Hmm.
it's not necessarily about one-on-one coaching, but it's relevant to the topic because you mentioned role plays quite a few
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
And most organizations really don't have the luxury or the bandwidth to run these role play sessions on an individual, basis. So what we do is we get people in a group session, and I actually have a personal story I wanted to share from the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
And so part of it is to give some feedback.
Hmm.
And if we consider this as coaching as well, so the ripple effect of it could be if someone, let's say, during these role play sessions, screw it up because it's a practice session, right? They
Hmm.
might, feel that they didn't do well and they lose their confidence, at least for that specific day. And this might affect their performance, right?
Yeah.
And also, you have a room of, let's say, 50, 60 reps, or maybe even more, that they see this role play, right? They see what happened to that rep. it might actually, bring some fear that, oh, is it going to happen to me as well?
For sure.
So my question is twofold. First and foremost, how do you make sure that that individual gets back on the feet and go about their day without losing, their confidence and perform? And also,
Hmm.
how do you manage the entire group so you can continue the role play session confidently?
Yeah. So let's start with the rep. I think that actually I'm going to start with leadership because everything starts with leaders leading from the front. Setting an expectation that whatever role you're in, but it's a we rehearse before showing up with our customers, or we rehearse before we go in the room and present to our stakeholders. Whatever that looks like, that needs to be felt at a team, at least a team level, but even better at an organizational level. Because preparation equates to confidence, and especially now is the time not to lose deals. I mean, with the macroeconomic environment, it's like everything feels like it's on the line. Why are we trying to show up unrehearsed? That would be like going to a play and everybody just did one dry run and they walked
Hmm.
through the script once, and you're like, no one wants to sit in the audience for that. Trust me.
True. True.
So I think that I actually would hypothesize that the people who are actually winning more deals are the ones who spend time rehearsing.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's like making sure that that's a mandate is we rehearse, and it might feel messy and it's going to feel uncomfortable because let's be honest, practicing in front of our peers is terrifying. And I think it's because the perception matters, and the more nervous you are, the more you care. So it's like the good kind of nervous, even though it feels terrible in the moment. um, I also want to call out that people always view the person up on stage as brave, and everyone is always wanting it to go well. No one's signing up for like a cringe moment. I mean, if you're like me, I like to do that like on Instagram. Love me some cringe moments on Instagram. But if it's my coworker or my colleague or somebody that, I want them to do well. I want them to do their best, and I'm cheering for them. And so it's, if you're the one on stage, you're the one feeling like you're messing up, you are in a safe space, even though it might not feel that way. And I think that one of the things that can help goes to the framework or how you set this up. So the second part of your question, and it's called the 2x2 framework. Um, and letting everybody know up front that this is how we're all gonna give feedback. And it starts with, there's only two questions: is what went well and what would you do differently. But it starts with the person who rehearsed. So if I'm the one on stage and I know I screwed up and you were facilitating this, Mo, you would say, okay, Nikki, what do you think went well? And I might go, oh well, I stayed in the time frame. I stated these 2 points, but that was really hard. And then you would say, okay, well, here's what I think went well. And you would share that. And then you'd ask me, okay, what would you do differently? And I'd probably go on and on about how horrible I did. And if somebody, typically people are generally self aware when they do something like this and they might miss a few things, but that's okay. It's allowing somebody to get the elephant like in the room, recognize themselves versus somebody else having to call it out for them.
Hmm.
And so this framework can be really helpful for people to be like, well, I know I did this, this, and this wrong. It'd be way harder if somebody said, you did this, this, and this wrong before they got to say it themselves. And if
Hmm.
somebody has something anecdotal to add on, like that feels less painful. So I think the 2x2 framework works really well in in group or in pairs. I mean, it works well in so many scenarios. So that's what I would recommend.
I love it. I actually didn't share the personal story because
I know. I was like,
didn't want to influence it. Actually, I wanted to hear like if you actually still practice the same thing that I experienced.
mm,
Remember when you got into Hopin, we had I think our first role play session. Oh man. And
Yes.
you started like teaching us about something really interesting. I don't know if you remember that, sales is a dance, we go back and forth.
Mhm.
And so I was your first candidate. So, oh, get on this. Let's
I could always
practice.
count on you. I could always count on you, Mo, to be like, sure, I'll go every time. I could always
And
count.
I was down doing it, but I screwed it up badly. And I remember Javi was in the room, like everybody's in the room, and you know, it was this silence, and I'm like, oh man,
Mhm.
and I freezed out. And I never look. I'm not a shy person. Like I go on calls, I go on
Right,
stage,
right.
but that feeling, that moment, terrifying. And I'm
Terrifying.
like, should I do this again? Should I skip? Like all this like thoughts came through my head. Oh man, all this even like more junior reps who book a call with me after the day just to ask some questions. We do call reviews even together, and
Mhm.
nobody's gonna respect me. Like that was the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah.
And is it even important or not? That's a separate topic for another day. But I had this like real bad fear, and to your point, I remember just like, okay, so how do you feel? Something like
Mhm.
that. I don't remember exactly like how you phrased it. And we
Mhm.
start laughing about it. And then you send me a message even after, the role play session. So okay, this is fine. Like this happened, that happened. So if you need some resources, it's here. Because we had this, by the way,
Yes.
connection. It was not like, hey, I just give you some unwelcome, feedback and go use
Right.
resources to get better.
Right.
So to your point, like building that safe environment, it's easy to say than
Yeah.
done, because when that happens, how you react as a leader can set the
Mhm.
stage for the rest of the team, so they feel comfortable actually going through these practices again.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing that because I mean, I'll never forget, I had a call. I was selling at Dropbox and my manager was in the room and you know, I'm presenting, whatever. And he says to me, how do you think that went? And I went the wrong route. I didn't show up with self-awareness. I was trying to protect myself. And so I said, I
Yeah.
think that went okay. And he said, do you want to know my feedback on the call? And I said, yes. And he goes, you were spiraling out of control. And I will never forget that feedback. Granted, really direct.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have said it in those words to someone else, but I'm telling you, I was never unprepared after that.
Yeah.
I was never as bad as I was in that moment. And it like gave me the jolt I needed because I never wanted to feel that again. And so
Mm-hmm.
that goes back to the preparation. Like, how do you do your best to set yourself up for success and be open to the idea that you're not going to get it perfectly, and what you're relying on everybody else to do is fill the gaps for you, fill
Mm-hmm.
in your blind spots. And if you can, it's not easy to do, it's way easier to say, but rehearsal gets more comfortable the more you rehearse.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Look, Nikki, I learned a lot, and it's so good to catch up after a long time.
The
Thank you very
best.
much for taking the time. So, last question. I did
Okay.
my last question, but this is just to wrap it up.
Okay.
If someone wants to reach out, first and foremost, can they and how?
Yes, I you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, connect with me. I mean, I work at LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So it is the best way to reach out to me.
Share all the secrets about these algorithms. Oh
Oh, I
my
know.
god.
I wish I knew. But I'm getting fed some pretty interesting content. So just thank you so much for having me. Reuniting with you has been, I mean, I told you, it's made my month. So
I appreciate you. Thank you very much. The feeling is mutual. All right, Nikki. Thank you very much, guys. I hope you learned something new and enjoyed this podcast, and see you soon. All right. Bye now.
bye.